having me. This is my second year of doing one of these events, and it's amazing to be invited back because I did such a bad job last year. And this year will be no exception because it's all about data center security. And of course, I'm the wireless guy. So what have I got to do with data center security? And I was thinking, I don't know what I'm going to write for this presentation. I like to write something different each time, if possible. And I thought, you know what, I'll do a demonstration rather than a presentation. And then I remembered that I'm going to be at a hotel and they're nearly as bad at providing network connectivity as they are keeping my passport details. So I thought, what am I going to do? And then inspiration struck at the strangest moment. Because my brother... How do I switch this on? Let's go there. No? Well, let's go old school. So for Christmas, and I don't know why he did this, but my brother thought it would be a good idea to give me the first 7 James Bond books. They're quite different from the films in that they're less politically correct. In fact, to the point that if you ever feel like reading James Bond, do not read Live and Let Die, because it is possibly the most xenophobic, racist, sexist book you will ever come across. I didn't even get to the finish of that book. It's seriously that bad. But then, I thought, you know what, I'll read Goldfinger. Goldfinger sounds like an interesting story, and amazingly, inspiration struck. So I don't know if you know about Goldfinger. I say this presentation may contain spoilers, but Goldfinger, or Auric Goldfinger, was like an international gold fiend. Right? He wanted to capture the world's gold market. He'd already had a lot of gold, and there was one thing left in his sights. He wanted to get the US gold reserve from Fort Knox in America, obviously. Now the interesting thing, and this is out of all of the stories that could be updated, because this was written in 1959, so quite out of date, quite an old story, but there were things that were very relevant to how we deal with security today. And I was quite surprised. Now the first thing that I noticed, a very early example of crime sourcing. Okay? He got a party together of various awkwardly named people to help him go and steal this gold. So he had Helmut Springer. He was from the Purple Gang in Detroit. I remember that guy. There was Billy Ring, was the Machine in Chicago. Mr. Solo from the Sicilian Mafia. Pussy Galore, who was just strangely named, and from the New York Concrete Mixers. And I can't remember where Jed Midnight came from. But they all gathered round in a room like this. Goldfinger said, look, I want to steal all the gold. They immediately said, you can't do this. It's simply not possible. Here's Fort Knox. They went, how the hell are we going to get into there? For a start, you've got 1,500 troops from the US 3rd Armoured Division just down the road. Well, in fact, just down Bullion Boulevard. They can come at any minute and stop us. If we get past that, we've then also got the US Mint Police, Special Fresh Police, providing a 2-perimeter approach to securing Fort Knox. And there's a lot of them, and they're armed. Now at this point, Auric Goldfinger is already losing his patience. Helmut Springer had to go, he was being too negative. So they said, well, hang on, what, even if we make it past the US Mint Police, the turret is fortified. Each one of these turrets, each 4 of them, is armed with a Thompson submachine gun. It's going to be hard. And then, worst of all, we've got the actual vault itself, the core. Each door weighs 15 tons. Quite heavy. The whole thing is made of seriously reinforced concrete. In fact, each part of the vault can be completely filled with water and none will leak. But Goldfinger, being the criminal mastermind that he fictionally was, said, look, this is just a robbery like any other. There is no difference. There is no difference because of these levels of security. It's just a robbery. which is a personal thing of mine because I believe that cybersecurity and cybercrime is just crime. Let's stop thinking of the cyber aspect of it. It's just people that want to get our stuff or want to do something unusual with it. So, logically, how do you defeat this system? How do you break into Fort Knox to get this gold? How do you achieve your objective? Well, for me, the most obvious way is get a man on the inside. Seems like the easiest thing to do, bypass all of these various systems of security. However, this is an action thriller, bear in mind. So what he decided to do was exploit the weaknesses, obviously. The first weakness was that all of those perimeter methods were linked by one thing. They all required a human to operate them. Now, in Goldfinger's case, he decided that using knockout gas, he would poison all of them, and thus remove all of these outer perimeter. Not much different from what we do today, because reality is we trust the human, and we trust the human far too much. Once they're inside the building, they can do what the hell they want. And that's even if we check. Most of the time when you're in the building, there are no checks. We're not checking when you plug something into the wire. We're just assuming you're trusted. Now, interesting, we did a survey recently, and something like 3,000 staff. 77% of them said, "Oh, cybersecurity, that's really important. That's the kind of stuff we worry about." Fine. The next question on the survey: do you think you've conducted any kind of risky online behaviour in the last year? 70% put their hand up and said yes. So, okay, we're dealing with idiots here, and this is our own staff, I hasten to add. Then, even more shockingly, 47% of them, so nearly half of the idiots that already explained that they did risky behaviour, admitted they don't use the security software we issue to them. Half of them don't even bother trying to log into MDM. Half of them don't bother using the firewall. So that's kind of what we're dealing with. But in the Goldfinger scenario, he's now taken out everything. Okay, so we're just left with the vault. We're just left with that data that's sat there in our data center, maybe sat in our aquarium. How do you think he got to that? Very simple. He went nuclear. Because this was the trick, okay? He was never trying to steal the data. He just wanted to destroy it. His idea, if I can get along Bullion Boulevard, past the US Mint Police, right up to the fort, no Thompson machine guns anymore to worry about, I just need to plant an atomic bomb next to the vault. That way I can irradiate all of the gold. That gold will now be worthless, and therefore the gold I own is going to be worth a lot more. Genius! Absolute genius. I love it, and that's how I would attack any business. Why would I want to steal their data when I can just destroy it and bet on the stock market that their stock's either going to fall or the competitors are going to rise? And the key thing to note, and it's still the same nearly everywhere I go, even if we're not bothering this type of security, everything seems targeted on looking for exfiltration. Every system is there that says, oh, I'll get too many alerts if I look for things that are trying to attack me. I want to look for an alert of something leaving the building, something calling home, malware calling out to a sporadic website, for example. But what if I'm not doing that? What if that is not my intention at all? These signs can get missed. So, can I ask, I'll get this working? I've got a bit of animation coming up and it's going to hinder me. So, time for a rethink, and this is actually what Fort Knox have done. I've done some investigation work. Hopefully I'm not appearing on some kind of NSA website now. But the point is, thank you, sorry about that, it's probably really simple, but I'm a very simple man. So, what happened in the case of Fort Knox? So, that original security there from 1959, probably the US decided this needs an update, because they quite often believe in fictional characters. And, you know, the president at the time said, I've heard about this Goldfinger guy. He sounds like a risk. So, what do you think they did to the core? What extra level of security did they apply there? Absolutely nothing. There was no need. They had 15-ton steel doors. They had reinforced concrete. It was completely waterproof. And in fact, you still couldn't get the gold out. The only way it was possible to do the damage was by placing an atomic bomb there. If we'd have stopped them getting there, it never would have been a problem. However, what they did around the edge, in terms of improving that security, was quite interesting. They applied what we call a better together approach. They decided to have lots of different systems that didn't rely on one individual or a set of human beings to operate it, to defend that base. First thing they did, and now it will be CCTV with AI. It will be able to identify the look of these people. Do they look like terrorists? Possibly. Let's identify them. The next stage, how do we go about providing protection? Well, they went for electric fences, obviously, but they wanted to go a little bit hardcore, so they put a minefield there as well. So far, so good. This bit I loved. When I found this out, I was actually really pleased with myself. For detection, they actually put ground detecting radar there to see if there was any movement within the perimeter. And now my favourite bit of all, when it came to responding, if they saw a threat, yes, it would call someone. You know, let's keep it realistic. But they also have laser-powered machine guns. I don't know what that is, but it sounds exciting. So they went for a whole range of different methods of protecting that network and going about protecting it, which is exactly the same as how we approach security at Aruba. Exactly the same. It's all about providing a perimeter that's flexible and a perimeter that can adapt to all different kinds of scenarios. To do that, we have a architecture, and I use that term knowingly. Essentially, it's how can we unify the network? It doesn't matter what your infrastructure is, how can we make sure that that's operating in conjunction with our security software to define what the policy will be, how access is to be granted, but also, more importantly, how can we work with third parties? How can we work with, you know, the CAFE EPO? How can we also work with what was formerly Sky High, for example? All of these things we can gather useful information from. And we don't know everything, but there will be someone that does. So the first step about the CCTV, let's know what's going on. Let's have visibility of what's going on. And this is what we're doing with ClearPass. So the first thing that happens, go off and discover the network. Sounds very simple, and it is very simple. But the reason behind it is twofold. Firstly, it's amazing how many customers don't patch their networks. It's amazing how many customers go to all amounts of expense on security and then don't patch their network. Network is so easy to break into if you don't patch it. You know, I've got customers that say, oh, I can't do 802.1x, Rich. That seems really complicated and my switches won't support it. Your switches won't support something that's at least 15 years old. We don't like to talk about it. But, firstly, a timely reminder to update things, yes, but also we're going to have a difference in policy. If someone is connecting from a switch that's 20 years old, I might have a different result sent back to them. You know, when that person tries to connect, fine, it just might be allow or deny. If it's a decent switch, it might be a bit more granular. Next stage is to go off and actually find those devices that are connecting to your network. And it will use many different forms of scanning. So whether it's active, such as WMI, Nmap, to typically DHCP fingerprinting and so on. Let's go and identify the devices. And we'll automatically categorize them, but you can create your own fingerprints as well. So if you do have fairly niche IoT devices, they will all look the same. It's only in terms of operation that we can tell more about them. And we're going to start to use some machine learning on that as well, to actually analyze the behaviour of these devices. Yes, it appears to be a camera, but it also appears to be doing something slightly different. We want to be able to pick that out. The next thing is we can also gather other information that's already on your network. Gather information from your MDM-EMM platform. See what that knows about these devices that have been added. The whole idea is I get a clear picture of all those devices that are out there so I can go and create policy. So if we actually take, I'm sorry, this is screenshotted from my demo by the way, but if we took one of these cameras here, so what do I know about that camera? First thing, and probably the most important thing, but understated thing, is the status. Is it known? Is it unknown? Is it disabled? Well, you might think, well, that's really stupid. That's so simple. But actually, I can give you any system that can be 99.999% accurate. But that is a camera. It's made by Acti, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't mean it's mine, though. And I said this to a customer recently because they were using Aruba access points. I said, oh, but why do we want to mess about with making things known or unknown? I said, because I work for Aruba. I have many old access points lying about. I said, what is to stop me currently walking into one of your stores, large retailer, plugging in my access point? Your system says, oh, it's an Aruba access point, I'll allow it on. So it doesn't mean it's yours. And the camera one's a good example. Where is that camera located? Is it actually in the office space or is it in the changing rooms? We don't know. We want to keep an eye on these things. The other thing we know, fine, we know the device category, we know the OS family it belongs to. We've got a fingerprint for it. The fingerprint in our case was just based on DHCP. These are the unique things about this camera. And then interestingly, we've also gone and gathered some attributes. So I've got this from a third-party database that internally I was using to manage all my devices. This will come up later, but all I know is this device is associated with this phone number. It's my phone number. So if anything happens to that device, something or someone should ring me. So when we go and connect, fine. First thing that happens, and we always sell the intelligent edge, but be aware the edge is dumb as anything. The intelligence is actually up here at our access control platform. So device connects, switch says, oh, I don't know what to do with this, I'll send it to ClearPass. ClearPass will then pick a service based upon the type of authentication requirement, the type of device. In our case, it's going to say that's an IoT device, I'll just use Mac authentication, just validate it on that. So it's gone off to the appropriate identity store, and fine, that device is now authenticated. But that's still kind of implicit trust at this point. I'm still allowing that device onto the network, it's allowed to do anything. But this is where most people are at today, if we're lucky. So we want to do a bit more than that though. We want to actually authorise what this device can do based upon the type of device, the location, the user behind it and so on. So we want to differentiate away from the fact that this isn't an enterprise laptop, I don't want to give it access to my data centre and everything else. It's not even an employee's own phone that I maybe just want to give internet access to. In our case, this is my camera. I want it to belong to the following group. And as an extra thing here, I want it to be monitored via a separate security platform. And I'll show you that in a moment. So the request has come in. Seen a few things already. So I've seen that the device is listed as known. So it's one that I manage. It's of the right OS family. And most importantly, its fingerprint is true. Okay? If it had previously connected as a camera and now magically it appears to be very similar to a laptop, I know something's afoot. I know someone is pretending to be that camera and therefore trying to do something. Simple checks and balances. The other thing is I've gone off to, in our case, our Aruba interest-backed platform, and I'm going to check that this device is being actively monitored. I can do the same with my phone. So for example, if I do go into the office, which is very rarely, if I'm allowed to connect, it's only if AirWatch is running on this device. That's why I don't connect this device anymore, because AirWatch makes my phone run too slow. So we're going to check that it's being monitored, then I'm going to make the decision. And in my case, the decision was send a message back to the switch to say, IoT allow access. allow the device on the network. It's not going to be necessarily very complex, but that's what it's going to do. Now the interesting thing is, once I've sent that message back to the switch, standard radius stuff, I can also make other calls. What happened?
Press B.
Press back.
B. There you go.
Magic. Thank you for that. Genius. So, as well as informing the network about what the device is allowed to do, I can also make API calls to all these other third-party systems to update them. So a typical thing is actually updating the next-gen firewall. Give the next-gen firewall a MAC to IP address mapping and also a username that was behind it. So now when you're looking at the logs, you're not just seeing another device. You know the device you're looking at, who it belongs to. But in our case, or for the sake of my demo at least, we were sending this information off to a platform we've got called Introspect. Now Introspect is user identity behavioural analytics. It uses AI and machine learning, etc. What it does is it takes network traffic analysis, so packet capture. It's looking for what the traffic is normally doing and making comparisons, looking for unusual behaviours. But it's also taking any security logs from third parties. So it could be your AD logs, it could be your firewall logs, antivirus logs, and so on. Plus, taking user and device info that we've learned during the authentication and authorization process. On top of that, it's taking external threat intelligence in from your IOC feeds. What's it doing with all this information? So, essentially it's using, unsupervised and semi-supervised machine learning to ascertain what normal looks like for the user or for the device. And it's then going to compare that behavior to the historical behavior of that device, but also against peer devices, so against similar devices. So in my case, is this camera acting A, like it always has done, but also is it acting the same as all the other cameras on my network? And we can do this based upon, say, user or device. So it's going to build up a picture. In our case, a guy from marketing, Sam. How many hosts does he normally use? When does he connect? Physically, when does he actually walk in the building? You know, is he a 9 o'clock guy? Is he an 8:30 guy? If he starts coming in at 10 o'clock, maybe that's fine. If he starts coming in at 6 o'clock in the morning and suddenly doing a lot of downloads, maybe that's something, you know, I want to be aware of. Now what it's going to do, it builds up this picture of normal, and then we'll spot anomaly. Fine, we've got hundreds of systems out there that can tell us something is unusual. Doesn't mean it's anything to actually worry about. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the second order analytics, which is correlating this behavioural change with any log information we've got. The idea is to build up a risk score for this user. Now the risk score, by the way, isn't cumulative. It isn't just, oh, I've seen one attack, that equals 1. Let's add another attack, his risk score doubles. This is all based upon the time it happens, events that are happening at exactly the same time, other sources of information. But each alert we see is based on confidence and severity. So severity is what stage of the kill chain is this attack at? You know, is it just a little bit of light research, or is this someone placing the atomic bomb at the door? You know, we want to differentiate between those two. And the other thing is the mathematical confidence. How many sources have I seen this information from? You know, what makes me so certain that this attack is actually happening? The whole aim of this system is to A, speed up the detection of when an event is happening, because they say, I think still like 100 days is the average time between you being breached and you knowing about it, or if you work for Starwood, it's like 3 years, but that's a different story. So we want to speed up the detection, but more importantly, we don't want to have huge number of alerts. You know, we want to be able to focus our efforts on the things that are actually important. And the system will also, for example, cluster alerts. And it will do this automatically. So, you know, customers that bought this also bought that. Exactly the same premise with this. So, based upon the risk score going up, we can go and investigate something. So if I go back to my camera, for example, I can see, you know, what is it in a particular watch list? So this might be people that have just resigned, people that have just handed in their notice to HR, you're on a watch list, because we think that any second, chances are you're going to try and download a load of things to take with you. Right? We can monitor that. It's also monitoring things like land speed violations. So Nigel mentioned before, the idea of what if I log in Denmark, 2 minutes later I'm in China. It's a land speed, can't happen. Question.
Is it possible also to go back if you hand in your notice, you resign, possibly you have copied your data just before that?
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, it will spot that, but you wouldn't be on a watch list at that point. It would you can still go threat hunting. It will still spot that anomalous behaviour. The guy that. However, I've always said just download everything all of the time. Keep safe that way. Okay? But again, but then it will catch you out because it will compare you to your peers. So the only way to do this is everybody in the office all agree with each other that you will steal everything. And a very good example, I'm going to digress because I've got 4 minutes. Great example, one of my favourite examples of an attack was a UK-based service provider called TalkTalk. And for some unknown reason, everybody that was a customer of TalkTalk started having their bank cards claimed. This is odd, very odd behaviour. TalkTalk said, well, I don't know how is this happening. We've outsourced our entire security to Wipro.
Wipro?
Yeah.
In India?
In India.
Thank you.
Turned out, you're not nothing. It turned out the entire help desk, the entire outsourced help desk was actually a criminal gang. They just got jobs at Wipro. Brilliant, love that. That's the sort of crime I like. But anyway, going back to my camera, I thought I told the system to give it IoT allow access. I was too vague. I should have said internal only and been very clear about this. Point is, I've seen the risk score go up. Okay? I've seen a massive change, and I can see an alert here. It says large data upload to external. Why is my camera suddenly sending data outside of the building? I can dig through this further. For each alert, as you see, it's quite severe. More importantly, I'm 100% confident that this is actually happening. I can drill down. I have got a playbook, so essentially I can say what was also happening at the same time. Do you consider this serious? Ultimately, I can go back forensically and actually look at the exchange that was happening at that particular time. This really is for your SOC analysts to take advantage of. But let's assume it was bad. How do I respond to that? Luckily, we just give you a quarantine button. Click the SOC analyst will click quarantine, and it can send a message, and we can again unify the network. So it's important to know it's not just our systems that do this. Any of the third-party systems we work with, and we work with over 150, if they spot something that's untoward, they can also make an API called ClearPath. Quite simply, sends the message, that device is now placed into quarantine. So what did ClearPath see? Sees a message that says, yeah, okay, radius message, put that into IoT quarantine. It might be a VLAN, it might be some downloadable access controllers, it doesn't matter. The interesting thing, as far as I was concerned, is that we can also make this API call at the same time. So not only have I quarantined the device, but in our case, I've automatically raised the ServiceNow help desk ticket. And actually for my demo, I sent a message to Twilio, my phone then rings, it's really exciting, imagine it. And I put it on speaker and said, oh, your camera has been disabled for the following reasons. However, linking it in with ServiceNow is actually far more interesting because you can now automate the help desk. It could be, in fact, that the call is automatically made at both ends at the same time. So you're answering the phone as the service desk are answering the phone. Oh, what have you done? Why is your camera misbehaving or whatever? It doesn't really matter. But the whole idea is just linking everything in together, making everything operate as one. And with that, I say, as an architecture, we try and make this more human. You know, it's trying to make you getting your stuff, which is, let's be honest, that's all we want to do. Let's make the network relate to that. You know, if I know who you are, what you do within the business, why can't the network behave in that way? But also, hopefully do it with a lot of the complexity hidden. You know, a lot of this totally frictionless for the user and also for the operator. Next one is, don't be scared of the unknown. You know, everyone's, oh, I'm really worried about the unknowns. Well, the idea should be the only unknown you have is a device that's yet to connect. Because as soon as it connects, comes into the system, I can profile it. It might be listed as unknown, as in unmanaged, but we can deal with that in a different way anyway. It doesn't matter. And the final one is, this will work with absolutely any network. In fact, like the biggest customer we've got of this is Cisco. Well, they're not Cisco, it's actually PepsiCo. But the point is they're operating on a purely Cisco network. And that's about it. Have we got any questions? Yes, no? No? Good. Right, thank you very much.